Playoffs. Playoffs. Yes, we are talking about playoffs today. College football has expanded the college football playoff format to 12 teams, which we already knew. We just didn't know exactly what the format was going to look like. They voted on that earlier this week. We now know what that picture will be. And we'll talk about how West Virginia can or maybe can't get there in 2024 and in the future. I'm Schuyler Callihan. This is another episode of Between the Eers here on Mountaineers Now. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube at Mountaineers Now. Give us a like and a follow on X at the same handle. So, the new format, 12 teams get in. You get the 5 highest ranked conference championships in automatically with 7 at-large bids. The first 4, or the top 4, will get an automatic bye, while the other 8 will play their way into that next round. And I do think there are some issues with this. I love the fact that they're going from 4 to 12. It gives teams like West Virginia and others an opportunity that otherwise they wouldn't have had in the 4-team playoff. But it's not going to stay like this for long, I wouldn't imagine. The only reason I say that is because, number one, you're going to piss off one of the biggest brands in college football in Notre Dame. Notre Dame cannot technically get inside the top 4 because they are not going to be able to play for a conference championship. Unless they make the full-fledged move to the ACC, they could go undefeated. Okay? They could go undefeated, be number 1 in the college football playoff rankings heading into Selection Sunday, and drop all the way to 5. That's the highest they can be because they don't have a conference championship. They have to have that. It's part of the criteria to get that first-round bye. So I don't think that's going to sit well with Notre Dame. Maybe it's a nudge to say, hey, you got to go find a conference. But I just don't see that playing out for very long. And Pete Thamel, he also, of ESPN, he also tweeted out that they were talking about a 14-team format, which would potentially kick off in 2026. So if there's already discussion about expanding it beyond 12, then to me, before we even get this thing started, this is not going to be the new norm for years to come, right? You're not going to have the 12 team. You're not going to have the situation where Notre Dame gets screwed if they go undefeated and we're the number 1 team all year. It's just not going to happen. So I do agree that you have to have some type of format in place where Notre Dame is included to have a chance to be the number 1 team. If they are the hands down number 1 team, they've got to be able to give that to them, that number 1 seed. But as far as this goes for the Mountaineers, I love it. And I think you should too. And I get some fans are saying, well, it takes away from the regular season. It really doesn't. Outside of a handful of teams, really, namely the 4 or 5 teams that were in the college football playoff every damn year anyway, it makes college football actually, to me, more important in the regular season. You're going to have more games that are going to have more meaning. You're going to have more games that are going to determine what happens on Selection Sunday. It's not just going to come down to 2 or 3 games, or it's not going to just come down to 2 or 3 teams leading into that Sunday. If you're West Virginia, again, in 2023 and in previous years, if you even wanted a chance to get into the CFP, you had to go undefeated or have 1 loss in a super strong resume, which is why when Shane Lyons was here as the AD, he scheduled the way he did. He scheduled 2 Power 5 non-conference matchups because he knew if West Virginia had an 11-1 season or even a 10-2 at worst, they were never going to get picked over an SEC runner-up, right? Say this year's situation played out. You think they're going to take them over an undefeated Florida State, even without their starting quarterback? Probably not. So you had to be able to pick um, the best schedule possible in terms of strength. It's the only way it was going to work. Unfortunately, it kind of backfired because West Virginia is one of the few teams out there playing 11 Power Five teams every year. And no one's really cared about the schedule. But it comes down to a couple of teams that it really matters. Cincinnati, for example, their schedule was heavily talked about when they got when they got into the playoffs because they were playing smaller, lesser teams. West Virginia would be in the same boat had they have been there, but maybe not if they were playing 11 Power Fives, because that's the one thing they could say that really nobody else was doing around the country. But I do think for 24, this really opens up a window here. And I get the Vegas, sports books that, they're saying 6.5 wins. You've got people saying they're tier 3 Big 12 program. And I'm sure here in a couple of months when the Big 12 preseason media poll comes out, that they're going to pick West Virginia somewhere in the middle of the pack. And no one's really expecting much out of this team again for whatever reason. Says this is a team that's a Hail Mary away from 10 wins, with its starting quarterback returning, with its top 2 running backs returning, with all of its top receivers returning minus Devin Carter, with yet a still very good offensive line despite the losses of Doug Nestor and Zach Frazier, and a rebuild defense. I mean, I don't know. I don't get why there's not enough hype for this team in the offseason. Maybe it'll happen as the offseason goes, but as of right now, there's not much. But for me, you're probably looking at those 7 at-larges, right? To win the Big 12, that's a big ask. And I'm not saying this team can't do that, but that would be asking this group to do something that no other West Virginia team has done. And I don't know if this group in particular is the group to get that job done. They're good, might be the most talent that Neil Brown's ever had. But is it a team that I see could go 11-1 and win the Big 12 championship? Probably not. This is a more difficult schedule. We've talked about this. But with all those games being at home, it's going to help you out. So I think you have to look at the 7 at large. And really, I just think if you can get to 9-3, which is not very, far-fetched to think that they could do, you're going to give yourself an opportunity because you're going to be hanging around that top 15. Let's face it, when you get to the end of the year, there's a lot of teams in the top 15, a lot of teams, and even more in the top 20 that have 3 and 4 losses. Very few have 2. So if you get to 9-3, you're going to put yourself in a great spot. Here's the kicker. If you get to 9-3 and you get to the Big 12 championship, because let's say they lose the first game to Penn State and then they go 7-2 in Big 12 play, they get to the conference championship and they win it. Or excuse me, say they lose it. Now they're 9-4. You're probably still in the mix, but I don't know. I think you're probably on the outside looking in. If it's reversed, you beat Penn State, you go 9-3, you lose the Big 12 championship, and Penn State's in the playoff, you might have a case. Again, but that 9-win mark, it gives you a chance. I don't think it necessarily puts you in. Getting to 10, now we're talking. Because you're either probably going to win the conference or you're having a serious discussion about being one of the best teams that isn't a conference champion. And I think 10 wins ought to put you in that spot. So if everyone just assumes they're going to lose to Penn State, that gives you one other game to lose, whether it's from week 2 all the way to the conference championship, or also the Big 12 championship. Like I said, because if you could lose another game in the season, you get to 10-2, lose the Big 12 championship, I still think they're in. So obviously there's a lot that goes into this. It's not a perfect science. It's not, West Virginia has to get to this number of wins to be able to get in, because we have no idea what other teams around the country are going to do. But getting this opportunity to go to 12 should make West Virginia fans extremely excited, because there is a path that really wasn't there before. I mean, you could say, yeah, there was, but it was impossible. They were going to have to run the damn table before. It's not necessarily the case now. You don't have to be perfect. And before they moved to 12, my theory, really, when the 4 team came out, I said that they were doing it wrong. They shouldn't have done that. They should have went to 8. And I'm still a huge put 8 teams in, but I don't mind the 12, because again, the more you add, the more chance it gives teams like West Virginia to get in. 14, 16, I don't know. We're starting to get a little bit too far. That's, to me, I don't know if it needs to expand that deep. But my 8-team format was, at least back at the time, because you had the Pac-12, you give an automatic bid to the conference champion of each of the Power 5, and then 3 at-larges. Simple as that. Pretty much a similar structure as this. The only worry is, obviously, is if you have a year in which one of those Power 5 teams is really down, or those Power 5 leagues is really down, you have a conference champion that's got, 4 losses. I mean, it's hard to justify putting in a team that may be 9-4 over an 11-2 SEC runner-up. So that's the hard part about it. That's why I like this format, because you're getting 7 at-large bids, not just 3. 7. So it's hard to really leave out a good football team that deserves to play for a national championship. So when we look at the schedule, I mean, outside of Penn State, that first half of the schedule, that's going to be tough to navigate. I'm not going to lie. Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Kansas. I mean, those are, Iowa State. That's some pretty tough teams. If they get past that first half of the schedule with 1 or 2 losses at most, I really think they have a chance to make a run at it. I do, because the back end of the schedule is more favorable. And I think this is a team that once it starts to win and gets itself going, it's just going to be a snowball of momentum in their direction. But I don't know if it'll happen this year. I don't know that it'll happen next year. But I would be willing to bet, if this program continues to trend in the direction it's trending, the Mountaineers will get a berth to the college football playoff sooner than later. I don't want to put a timestamp on it, because there's so much that goes into this. Injuries, recruiting, transfers, it's a lot. Things change on a year-to-year basis. As of this year, right now, 2024, I think they're right on the edge. Outside looking in, but I think they can play their way there. It's 100% out there on the table for them, right for them to grab. And they get that opportunity to put a really good stamp of approval on their resume in week 1 against Penn State. I'm Schuyler Callihan. That'll do it for me here today on Between the Eers. Again, you can check us out on YouTube at Mountaineers Now. You could also visit our site at mountaineersnow.com on SI. And we will wrap things up for the show tomorrow. And we'll also have the West Virginia Iowa State basketball post-game show on Saturday. That one tipping off at 2 p.m. So thank you guys for tuning in. We'll check back with you here tomorrow on Between the Eers.